All right, let's kick off this deep dive. Today we're talking Spanish fluency, and we're going to be focusing on something super important. We're going to be focusing on the power of listening.
Absolutely.
I'm really excited to dig into these source materials today. We've got real-life Spanish dialogues to unpack, and I think this is going to be eye-opening for our listeners.
Yeah, I think a lot of people overlook how important listening is. It's not just about understanding words, it's about training your brain to decode how an entire language sounds.
Yeah, like how we learned our first language,
Right.
right? Just soaking it all in.
Exactly, total immersion.
But Spanish, it can be a little trickier. I mean, think about all those different accents and the slang.
You're right, it's more than just vocabulary. It's the rhythm of the language, the intonation, the pauses. All of that conveys meaning.
So instead of getting stuck translating word for word, I need to let my brain just get used to the flow of Spanish.
Exactly, you build those neural pathways one sound at a time.
It's like learning your way around a new city.
Mm.
Eventually, you don't need the map anymore.
That's a great analogy.
But how do we actually put this into practice?
Well, you've got some great examples in your source material, like that beginner-level chat. Let's imagine we're eavesdropping in a coffee shop.
Okay, I'm picturing it now. I can smell the cafe con leche. Who are we listening to?
Ana and Carlos, two friends catching up. Ana starts with a simple, "Hola, ¿cómo estás?"
Ah, the classic greeting.
But pay attention to how Ana says it. It's upbeat, almost musical, which is very characteristic of casual Spanish conversations. Carlos replies, "Hola, Ana. Estoy bien, ¿y tú?" So he effortlessly returns the question, which is a really important social courtesy to master.
So it's not just the words themselves, but how you use them. What happens next?
Ana replies, "Muy bien, gracias," and then asks Carlos, "¿Qué haces hoy?"
Okay, simple question. But I bet the pronunciation is key here.
Absolutely. Especially that rolled R. It's a vital part of the soundscape.
I'm working on my rolled R's as we speak. So what does Carlos say?
Voy a estudiar español.
I'm going to study Spanish. Makes sense. We're on the same wavelength here, Carlos.
And like a true Spanish speaker, he follows that with a quick, "You too." It's very casual. Assumes they're both on the same page.
And Ana, keeping up with the language learning theme, replies, Yo también. Qué casualidad. Wasong kata. Even in this basic chat, you can hear their shared enthusiasm.
Exactly. It's that energy that brings language to life. As a listener, you're picking up on those subtle cues, those rhythms that reveal so much about the culture.
So I'm not just learning Spanish, I'm getting a glimpse into how Spanish speakers interact with each other.
Exactly. You're tapping into the culture. Now, are you ready to move on to something a little more challenging? We've got a new location. Let's head to a park.
It changes scenery. I love it. Let's see what's happening in this park.
Here we have Sofia and Pedro. Their conversation's a little more advanced, but is a perfect example of how you can learn grammar through listening without even realizing it.
Okay, I'm all ears. Bring on the grammar osmosis.
Sofia starts off with, "Hola, Pedro. ¿Qué tal el fin de semana?" Now, you probably recognize hola and fin de semana, but pay attention to how she asks, "How was your weekend?"
It sounds so natural, effortless.
Exactly. That's what we're aiming for. And with listening, you absorb not just the words, but the cadence, the natural flow of the question.
So just by listening, I can pick up on how to speak more naturally, too. It's like my brain is internalizing the rhythm of the language.
That's it. Now listen to Pedro's reply. "Muy bien, gracias. El sábado fui al cine y el domingo hice senderismo."
Okay, so he's talking about his weekend activities, going to the cinema on Saturday and... Wait, what did he do on Sunday?
He is senderismo, which means I went hiking. You didn't need a dictionary to understand the general idea, though, right?
Yeah.
That's your brain starting to figure things out based on the context.
That is pretty cool. So listening really is more than just passively hearing words. What about Sophia? What does she say?
She says, "Yo fui a la playa con mi familia. Hacía mucho calor, pero lo pasamos genial." Talking about going to the beach with her family, the hot weather, and having a great time. But what's important here is their use of the past tense. Both Pedro and Sofia seamlessly use those past tense verbs, fui, hice, pasamos. And by listening, you're subconsciously picking up those patterns.
Sneaking in the grammar, learning like it's a vegetable in a smoothie. I like it.
Exactly. Listening bypasses that conscious, rule-based learning. It allows your brain to learn language the way it was designed to.
I'm feeling like a language learning ninja. But what about when things get really tricky with faster speech and slang? Can listening really help me with that?
Absolutely. That's what our next source is all about, a fast-paced, real-world encounter on a busy city street.
Oh, sounds like a challenge. Let's see if my ears are ready for it. Bring it on.
And we're back for more Spanish listening practice.
You know what? Even after their short dialogues, I already feel more in tune with the rhythm of Spanish.
That's what consistent listening does. It really preps your brain for a deeper dive into the language.
Okay, so we went from that coffee shop to a park, and now we're ready to take on those city streets.
That's right.
So what should I be listening for in this kind of fast-paced environment? What's different?
Well, remember how we talked about building a mental map of the language? Now think about adding a whole new layer to that map, the layer of nonverbal communication.
Ah, the unspoken language. I know Spanish speakers are pretty expressive, so how does that factor into understanding what's going on?
It's huge. I mean,
Yeah.
think about it. Even in English, a raised eyebrow or a hand gesture can completely change what a sentence means.
Oh, totally. Like if someone says, that's great, but they're rolling their eyes, they're not really thrilled.
Exactly. And in Spanish, those nonverbal cues are even more important. A shrug, a head tilt, even the way someone holds their hands adds layers of meaning to what they're saying.
So I have to listen with my eyes, too.
Precisely. And the more you tune in to those nonverbal cues, the more you understand not just the words, but the speaker's intent and emotions.
It's like I'm learning to read the whole person, not just their words.
That's what truly brings language to life. It's that connection, that deeper understanding.
I've definitely felt that when traveling. Even if I can't understand the language, a smile, a gesture of goodwill can go a long way.
It's true. And in Spanish, those nonverbal cues are embedded in the culture. They're not just an afterthought. They're a fundamental part of communication.
So how can I learn to read those cues? Is there like a Spanish body language dictionary I can study?
You know, the best way to learn is just to observe.
Okay, so just pay attention. But there's so much going on in a conversation. How do I know what to focus on?
Start with the basics. Eye contact, facial expressions, hand gestures. Are they making eye contact or looking away? Do their facial expressions match their words? Are their hand gestures subtle or dramatic?
Got it. So look for those small details that add context to what's being said.
You got it. And here's a pro tip. Watch Spanish language movies with the sound off. Just focus on the visuals and see how much you can understand just from the actor's body language.
That's a great idea. I'm definitely trying that tonight.
I think you'll be surprised by how much you can pick up. And then when you add the dialogue back in, you'll start to see how those nonverbal cues enhance and sometimes even contradict the words themselves.
This is making me realize there's a lot more to listening to Spanish than I thought. It's a full body experience.
It really is. The more you engage all your senses, the deeper your understanding will be.
Okay, I'm pumped to try and decode some nonverbal secrets. What else should I listen for in this city street encounter?
Well, here's where it gets really interesting and maybe a little challenging. We're going to bump up the difficulty level, faster speech, some slang, and regional variations.
Yeah, the regional variations, that's something I struggle with. Sometimes it feels like Spanish is a completely different language depending on who's speaking.
It's a common challenge. And it's why immersion is so important. Exposing yourself to different accents and dialects will help your ear adjust.
So I'm training my brain to recognize different flavors of Spanish.
That's a great way to put it. Think of it like music. You can recognize a song, whether it's played on a piano or guitar, right?
Yeah, it's still the same song, just with a different sound.
It's the same with language.
Yeah.
The core structure, the grammar, those are all the same.
Yeah.
But the accent, the pronunciation, the slang, those are like the different instruments giving the language its unique texture and color.
I love that. So how do I train my ear to pick up on those different instruments of Spanish?
Well, first of all, don't beat yourself up if you don't understand everything right away.
Oh, thank goodness. Sometimes I get so frustrated.
It's all part of the learning process. You're teaching your brain to do something new, something challenging. Be patient with yourself.
Patience is key. But practically speaking, how can I get better at understanding different accents?
Finding authentic content from the regions you're interested in is a great place to start. Do you have a favorite Spanish-speaking country?
Oh, that's a tough one. I'm fascinated by so many. But I think I'd have to say Mexico. The culture, the music, the food, it's all so vibrant.
Perfect. Mexico is a treasure trove of language with so much regional variation. So for you, I'd recommend exploring Mexican podcasts, movies, TV shows, anything that immerses you in that Mexican Spanish sound.
That's a great idea. It's like my own personalized Spanish learning adventure.
Exactly. And don't just passively listen. Try to actively identify what makes that accent unique. The vowels, the rhythm and intonation, the slang.
So like I'm becoming a Spanish language detective trying to solve the mystery of the accent.
Exactly. The more you do that, the more attuned your ear becomes. And what used to sound like a jumble of sounds will start to make sense.
This is making me excited to explore all the different flavors of Spanish out there. It's like a whole new world of sound.
And that's where the real fun begins. Language learning isn't just about textbooks and rules. It's about connecting with a culture, with people, with a whole new way of being. And listening is your ticket to that world.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Now, are we finally ready to meet Laura and Miguel and experience this city street encounter? I'm all ears. Okay, I'm ready. Bring on that city street encounter. After all this talk about nonverbal cues and different accents, I feel like I've really leveled up my Spanish listening game.
That's great to hear. And remember, every conversation you hear, every new sound you pick up, it all helps you get closer to fluency.
So no more holding back. Let's dive into this advanced level dialogue and see what Laura and Miguel have to say.
All right, picture yourself on a busy city street, people rushing around, music coming from cafes, conversations all around. Laura spots Miguel and calls out to him.
What did she say?
She says, Hola, Miguel. Hace tiempo que no te veo. ¿Cómo te va? It's a casual greeting, but she also mentions that she hasn't seen him in a while. A nice way to start the conversation, right?
And whoa, the speed. They're really talking fast.
That's how everyday Spanish often sounds. But don't worry if you don't understand every single word. Just try to catch the main idea and listen for those key phrases.
Okay, good advice. So she's asking how he's doing, and I think I heard hace tiempo, which means it's been a while. What does Miguel say back?
He replies, Hola, Laura. ¿Todo bien? He estado ocupado con el trabajo y algunos proyectos personales. ¿Y tú? He acknowledges her comment about it being a while, saying he's been busy with work and personal projects. And then, of course, like a true Spanish speaker, he turns it back on her with y tú to keep the conversation flowing.
You know, I'm noticing they use those little filler words like pues and bueno a lot. It makes the conversation sound so much more natural.
Definitely. Those small words and phrases, they might seem insignificant, but they really give the language its flavor, its natural rhythm.
So it's not just about knowing the perfect textbook phrases. It's about picking up on those nuances that real Spanish speakers use.
Exactly. Like the difference between reading a recipe and actually savoring a delicious dish.
Okay, so back to Laura and Miguel. How does Laura answer his question?
She says, Pues, igual de ocupada. Entre el trabajo y los estudios, apenas tengo tiempo libre. She mirrors his response, saying she's also busy and barely has any free time between work and studies. But it's her tone that's interesting. She doesn't sound like she's complaining. It's more like they both understand each other's busy lives.
Yeah, like they're bonding over it.
Right. And you'll notice they use those more complex grammar structures without even thinking about it. Like the present perfect tense, he estado, and that phrase, entre el trabajo y los estudios. By listening, you're intuitively getting a feel for how these things work in real conversations.
It's like my brain is putting the pieces together behind the scenes. Pretty amazing. So what happens next?
Miguel replies, Te entiendo. A veces siento que los días no tienen suficientes horas. He's showing empathy, saying he understands how she feels. Sometimes he even feels like there aren't enough hours in the day.
I get that. Don't we all feel that way sometimes?
It's a universal feeling, for sure. And it shows that even in more advanced Spanish conversations, you can find common ground and connect through shared experiences.
So they're really connecting, sharing their experiences of being busy. Where does the conversation go from there?
Well, Laura changes the subject a little and asks, Por cierto, ¿has probado el nuevo café que abrieron en la esquina? She wants to know if he's tried the new cafe that opened nearby. A subtle way to maybe wrap up the conversation and suggest meeting up sometime.
Very smooth. She's using the conversation to make plans for the future.
Exactly. And notice how she casually slips in another grammar point, the present perfect tense again, with has probado. Just by listening to these real-life examples, you're picking up all kinds of new grammar tools.
This is making me so much more confident about understanding and speaking Spanish. It's really cool to see how everything we've talked about, listening, nonverbal cues, accents, all work together to build fluency.
That's what makes language learning so exciting. It's not just about memorizing rules, it's about immersing yourself in the sounds, the culture, the heart of the Spanish language.
I've loved dissecting these dialogues with you today. It's been really eye-opening. Any final words of advice for someone who wants to become more fluent in Spanish through listening?
Stay curious, be consistent, and be patient. Surround yourself with Spanish music, podcasts, movies, TV shows. Listen to conversations whenever you can. Don't be afraid to make mistakes, and always celebrate every little step forward.
That's fantastic advice. This deep dive has definitely made me realize the power of listening. It's not just a skill, it's like a key that unlocks a whole new world.
And the more you listen, the more you understand, and the more you can connect with all the beauty and richness that the Spanish language has to offer.
Well, thank you for joining us for this deep dive into the world of Spanish listening practice. I hope everyone listening has gained some valuable insights and feels inspired to keep learning Spanish.
Hasta la próxima.